All yours, Regina.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm here in Pueblo West today. And it's so funny because, I moved to Beulah a couple months ago and we've had snow on the ground almost constantly. The weather, I mean, I like it, but the snow on the ground all the time. I come here, I feel like I went to Florida. There's no snow. I've been laying outside on the grass. It's just like, it's like, what, wait, why did I leave this place? But the truth is Beulah is much more beautiful. But today this house goes on the market and there's one or two showings this afternoon. So I came here to touch up the cleaning because, I moved out a couple months ago. So it's gotten a little dusty. I found some dead bugs, that kind of thing. So, so once again, I was cleaning and listened to y'all this morning. I think I'm going to make Wednesday my regular cleaning day. It's just so nice to clean and listen to y'all. So we are here for Out of the Stillness. And today we're going to start in 7 Steps to Awakening at quote 404. All right, here we go. There is no duality. There are no bodies, and therefore there are no relationships among them. Of course, this is clear non-dual seeing. This is when difficult to explain, actually. Somebody asked me to explain it. I had a little luncheon on Monday with some ladies at my house out in Beulah, and one of the ladies asked me to explain this non-dual seeing, and I just couldn't. I think once I found a way of explaining to you how the shift occurred, but I just couldn't because it's beyond explanation, because it's not like I used to imagine that physical bodies disappear, for example. This says there are no bodies, right? It's not like physical bodies disappear, which is what I think I used to imagine, maybe what some of y'all have imagined. It's just that the seeing, not physical seeing, I guess awareness seeing, right? Awareness is seeing. It's the seeing is much more aware of the essence than the physical. So it's kind of like once upon a time, the physical was way out here. And actually, it seemed like the awareness was back here somewhere hiding, right? And then what happens is this starts to occur. But then, so now the physical is back here and the essence is here, right? And so this is what's seen as real. And all of these are still seen. They just don't have the focus, the oomph, the power, the meaning, or any of that as the essence, right? The essence is where the meaning is coming from. So again, hopefully that helped. There is no duality. There are no bodies, and therefore there are no relationships among them. So we're going to look at how I contemplated that quote many, many years ago. So if we turn to 404 in Out of the Stillness. All right, I'm looking at the first sentence and I went, oh, this is a good contemplation. I haven't read all of it, but I can tell from the first sentence that it's a good contemplation. Can another person hurt me? Can another person threaten me? Can another person fulfill me? The real question is, who am I? The mind, believing in cause and effect, experiences change. Often the cause of change is attributed to another person or an outside circumstance. However, it looks like there's some words missing here, so we'll get through it. However, truth, no, this is right. Truth is a noun here. However, truth experiences no change. no effect. Truth experiences no change, no effect. So there can be no cause, not a person, not a circumstance, and not a thought. The unlearning process may look like this. First, there's the belief. He is the cause of my upset. Then one realizes only my thoughts can cause my upset. And finally, it's seen, I am constancy. There is no upset. Therefore, there is also no cause. Thought and world are illusory, which is recognized because they have no effect. And of course, I know some of y'all were listening to the What is Constant game a while ago. So that fits in with this perfectly. So again, the quote that I was contemplating is, there is no duality. There are no bodies, and therefore there are no relationships among them. And the question I started asking is, can another person hurt me? Can another person threaten me? Can another person fulfill me? And I'm going to skip down to where it says the unlearning process may look like this. First, there's the belief he is the cause of my upset. And of course, she is the cause of my upset, or they are the cause of my upset. You know, this is something we've all experienced, true? Right? Somebody else, blaming somebody else, really feeling that somebody else is to blame for how we feel. So this is where we all begin. And then one realizes, once we get onto that spiritual path and we start really looking at what's truly going on, then one realizes only my thoughts can cause my upset. And that's a very important stage, right? And that's where we start learning to let go of thoughts. And as we let go of thoughts, we start finding that we don't get upset as much. But what's really interesting about that stage, even though it's a very important stage, that stage still thinks I can be upset. What am I identified with if I think I can be upset? Aren't I identified with the mind and the emotional body? Right? So my identity hasn't shifted yet. So it's a very, very important stage. I often call it the purification stage. It's a very, very important stage, but my identity hasn't shifted. I'm still identified with the body mind, the emotional body mind. You know, the emotional body mind is experiencing more peace because I am not believing thoughts like I used to. And that's good. That's very good. In fact, if I was to reference Dr. David Hawkins, Rising in Consciousness, you know, that courage stage is where we're really learning that only my thoughts can cause my upset. And we're learning to let go of our thoughts. The neutrality stage is really when we've achieved a certain amount of peace because we aren't believing our thoughts yet. But no shift in identity has occurred at the neutrality stage. Still identified with the mind, it's just now there's a peaceful mind, or at least a much more peaceful mind, right? So one realizes only my thoughts can cause my upset, but then notice, and finally it is seen, I am constancy, right? I'm not the mind or the emotional body. I'm constancy. You know, it's interesting because there's some things I certainly don't really talk about to most people because they just think I was lying. And the reason they think I was lying is because they have no way of understanding, right? They have no way of understanding. But in the past couple of months, you know, there have been some things going on in my life, which have been extremely upsetting to my daughter still to this point, extremely, extremely upset. And I haven't had the same experience, although in the story, certainly I'm in a position where I could have the same experience, right? But I haven't had the same experience. But there have been a few times in the last month where these little blurps of anger would show up and last like 60 seconds, Or this little blurb of a broken heart would show up and just be there till I fall asleep, maybe still be there when I wake up, but then disappear and just go away on their own. Okay, here's the part. Here's why I don't tell people that. Okay. Because I am not identified with the mind or the emotional body. The truth is, I wasn't angry even for a minute. The truth is, I didn't have a broken heart even for a couple hours. Those things showed up. They were there. I saw them. But what I am, did not experience them. I saw them. And see, that's what this is talking about. When it says, and finally, it's seen, I am constancy. There is no upset. Therefore, there is no cause. And hold on, unfortunately, I got to check text because I've got showings coming today. Okay, not that one. I'm getting these little texts now that say when people are coming. And I have to type okay, meaning yes, it's okay if they come. So until the house is sold, I'll probably not be ignoring text, because I want to type that little okay, right? That's what happens when you're in a real estate mode. So that's a shift away from identifying with the mind and the emotional body. And this is something that once I certainly had no understanding of either. When I was identified with the mind and the emotional body, but at the neutrality stage or beyond, where the mind and the emotional body were much more peaceful. And then I saw someone be upset and say that they weren't upset. I thought they were lying. Now I understand that that's possible. It's possible for the body mind to be upset and I to be the constancy and not be upset. You see, what happens is the body mind becomes a part of the screen. And I am not on the screen. Now, my current experience, and we can be open to this changing. My current experience is that those little upsets, I call them burps, those little burps that come through the mind and the body. And in fact, I think they're, based on my recent experience, I think they're related to very old conditioning that had lots of attention for lots of years. And it's just like a finishing coming through, right? Kind of like a little finishing coming through. But my experience is they don't get any power, which is why they don't last. You see, they aren't being identified with. If I was identified with the body mind, they'd probably get more power and therefore they would have a longer life. And because I'm not identified with the emotional body mind, I'm not going to claim not to be identified with the physical body, but the emotional body mind, because I'm not identified with that, they don't get that attention. They don't get that belief. And so they may come up, but they pass very, very quickly. It's almost, like I said, it's almost like it's somewhere in the conditioning and it just hasn't finished. And it just comes, this circumstance is given an opportunity to come out and be done. So again, if we look at this, let's look at these three stages. The first stage, which we all know, he is the cause of my upset. I'm upset because of that person, right? Or this event. The pointing is going out, whether it's going to a person, to a circumstance. I'm upset because of that, right? Then only my thoughts can cause my upset. And this is a very powerful position. This is kind of like taking back your power. You cease to be a victim when you realize that the only cause of the upset is what you're believing, your thoughts, and that if you just learn to let go of the thoughts, then you are free. But like I said, the identification with the emotional body mind is still there. But then finally it's seen. I am constancy. There is no upset. There never, ever, 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 ever is an upset in awareness, in it itself. I mean, certainly you all have experienced, right? Watching awareness while something was going on with the emotional body or the mind. Was awareness itself emotional or upset? No. So you see, once that identity shifts to the awareness itself, it's a true statement. It's not a lie. It's a true statement. I am not upset, even if the body mind experiences a burp, right? But again, based on my current experience, and I reserve the right to change my mind later, those burps are quite small because they're not getting the attention they need to really be birthed into something big, right? They're not getting that belief or that attention. They're just something that's popping out of the conditioning. So, can another person hurt me? Can another person threaten me? Can another person fulfill me? The real question is, who am I? You see how that's the real question? Who am I, or what am I, right? If I am the constancy or the awareness, the answer to all of those questions is no. If I am the emotional body or the mind, the answer to all those questions is most likely yes, right? Unless you've really learned not to believe your thoughts, then there may be this neutrality stage where, for the most part, I still means mind, but mind has learned not to be hurt because it doesn't believe thoughts. Mind has learned not to feel threatened because it doesn't feel thoughts. And mind has learned not to look outside for fulfillment because it doesn't believe thoughts. So the neutrality stage is, you know what gets purified? When I talk about the purification stage, it's the mind. That's what gets purified. And the neutrality stage is experiencing a purified mind. That is not the same thing as a shift in what you identify with. However, and this is why some people can have the shift first, and then they go through the purification phase. You've heard of it happening that way too, right? The mind doesn't have to be purified for the shift to happen. In my case, it went through those stages in what's considered the normal order, you know, like the purification first and then the shift. And the reason I think the purification was helpful is if you think of a window, maybe just think of a window that's filthy. Think of the dirtiest, filthiest window you can imagine. You know, it's not only got dirt on it, it's like food splattered on it and nobody cleaned it. You know, it's just a dirty, filthy, filthy window. And when you look at that window, what do you notice? The crap. Right? I mean, you can't help it. It is so covered with crap that when you look at it, you see the crap. That's what's in focus. Right? But if you clean that window, this is the purification process of the mind. If you clean that window, you start learning to look at it and then through it. You're no longer paying as much attention to the window because there's not so much crap there anymore. Now you're able to look through the window. So this, to me, is why purifying the mind can be very, very helpful. Because then it's easier to focus on awareness because we're not so distracted by all of the crap in the mind. But it isn't a requirement, right? You can shift identity without purifying the mind. But in my case, I found it to be very, very helpful. Again, it removes the distractions. So can another person hurt me? Can another person threaten me? Can another person fulfill me? The real question is, who am I? That's it. Who am I? Am I all of these thoughts that thinks I need this and this and this and this? Well, if so, I can probably get hurt, feel threatened, or feel fulfilled by someone, depending on whether they fit in the little box of what my thoughts say they need to fit in, right? But if I'm identified with awareness, if I'm identified with constancy, then the answer is no to every one of those questions. The mind, believing in cause and effect, experiences change, right? Good days and bad days. Often, the cause of change is attributed to another person or an outside circumstance. I would say usually, actually, usually. However, truth experiences no change, no effect. So there can be no cause, not a person, not a circumstance, and not a thought. The unlearning process may look like this. First, there's the belief, he is the cause of my upset. Then one realizes only my thoughts can cause my upset. And finally, it's seen, I am constancy. There is no upset. Therefore, there is also no cause. Thought and world are illusory, which is recognized because they have no effect. You know, I was reading lesson 132 from A Course in Miracles this morning, and I didn't bring it with me. So I'm going to bastardize the quote a little bit. But the gist of the lesson that day, that you were supposed to say this and then sit for 15 minutes and contemplate it. The gist of the lesson on that day is something like I am real because the world is not. Right? I am real because the world is not. That's what this is saying. This is saying I am real because there is no cause that can affect me. Therefore, you know, the world is illusion. But those are the same statements. I am real because the world is not. When I see that the world, no matter what happens in the world, has no effect on me, then I know that I am real. Right? That's how I know I am real, because nothing affects me. I am real because the world is not. Thought and a world are illusory, which is recognized because they have no effect. So let's move on to 405. 405 says, be not deluded. Abandon false perception and behold the truth. Be not deluded. Abandon false perception and behold the truth. I saw someone recently who was very, very upset, and I was talking to them about their upset and thoughts and all of that. And one thing I said to the person was, you know, one of the first things you need to do is separate the false from the true. And if you've taken some of my retreats, you've seen this, you know, separate the false from the true. You know, so if I just make up an example, let's say I came to Pueblo West today, and again, the weather is so nice here. I'm like, oh, why did I ever move to Beulah where it snows all the time? Right? Let's just imagine that was my attitude. Oh my God, what have I done? Yeah. I was in Colorado. In fact, I've called Pueblo before the Florida of Colorado, right? Because it's really just so much nicer in weather than the rest of Colorado. So, you know, here I was in the Florida of Colorado, and now I've moved to the mountains and there's snow all the time and blah, 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 blah. You know, I can't be happy here. I can't go outside and lay on the grass. You know, just blah, 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 blah. So what you do is, you know, is you start writing out all your thoughts. I should never have moved. It's his fault I moved. He made me move, blah, 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 blah. You write them all out. And then after you write out all your thoughts, the first thing that you can do is just go back with clarity. Once the emotion has dropped away, go back with clarity. Say which of these thoughts are true and which of these thoughts are false. So for example, I moved to Beulah. We're going to go ahead and count that as true. We're not being all spiritual here. We're just looking at the facts. I moved to Beulah. True. He made me move. And that's not really true. I was excited about this new house. I was willing to move. That's false, right? So you really have to go through with true discrimination and see which of these thoughts are true and which of these thoughts are false. But you will be amazed if you do this with true discrimination, how many of those thoughts are false. There are very few facts that pass through this mind. Almost all of it is distorted interpretation. Distorted interpretation. And one way you can tell if it's a fact or not is, would everybody agree with me? Would everybody agree that I moved to Beulah? Well, yeah. I mean, I changed my address and everything, moved my clothes. Yeah, that's true. Would everybody agree he made me? No. Right? No, everybody would not agree with that. So it can be very important sometimes to sit down and look at your thoughts with a little bit of sanity and just see how many of these thoughts are actually true. And then what was helpful to me was to call the false thoughts imagination. Now, whether that's going to be helpful to you or not, I can't say, but I'm imagining all of this stuff and I'm causing my own suffering through my imagining. It was always important for me to see that. I'm causing my own suffering through my imagining. So anyway, this is what this quote reminded me of, because it starts off, be not deluded. Because aren't you deluded when you're believing all of these false thoughts in your mind as if they are true? Be not deluded. Abandon false perception and behold the truth, right? Abandon false perception and behold the truth. And of course, 4 or 5 is really talking at even a higher level than what I just described. But most of us still need to practice what I just described. Just, what are the facts in the story? How many facts are in this story? And how much of this story is purely imaginary? All right, let's look how I contemplated 405. Suffering from illusion is not natural, and therefore it is not necessary. One caught up in believing illusion may say, but I see as I see, and I cannot get out of seeing this way. One does see as she sees, but one's seeing does not have to be believed. Don't focus on seeing. Don't focus on perception. There is a way to be set free from what you see, and the means are reasonable. Contemplate, inquire, reflect on insight. And, at least most of you all know how to do that. So, this is really a very wordy way of saying, where is my attention? Is my attention on just believing all of these thoughts in my mind? Or is my attention on, writing them down, inquiring into them, possibly being guided to a spiritual teaching, contemplating that teaching, receiving some insight, and reflecting on that insight? You guys have heard me say that when the thoughts of awakening first came, I used to write them down, put them in my pocket, and pull them out multiple times a day and reflect on them, right, throughout the day. Contemplate, inquire, reflect on insight. This is a shift of focus, a shift of attention. And if you have a shift of focus or a shift of attention, do you think that's going to change your experience? Absolutely. I love this first sentence. Suffering from illusion is not natural. I was listening to Anne this morning. First of all, I don't know if Anne's here, but Anne was telling the story of when her mom died and then started breathing again. But what I loved about the way Anne was telling the story is she was laughing. Now, if anybody knows Anne, Anne used to think she would not survive her mother's death, right? I mean, she truly believed that, did she not? And now she's talking about her mother dying and laughing. Don't get me wrong, she's still mourning and all that, but she can see the humor in her experience of the experience. That is such a brilliant shift. This is the kind of things this spiritual practice can do for you, right? It's such a brilliant shift from absolute panic that when her mom dies, she's going to die because she won't be able to take it, to being able to tell us the story of her mother's death and laugh at some of the parts, as you know, because her experience of it was somewhat humorous, and now she can look back at it and laugh at it. It's amazing. But one of the things that Anne was talking about today, and she said it 2 or 3 times, she talked about the sadness that comes up, right? And, you know, her mom didn't die that long ago, so it's still very, very fresh. But she said, I am not suffering. She said, there's sadness, but I am not suffering. And it was also funny, you know, she gave this silly example. She said, I don't know where that example came from. She gave this silly example about picking up a fork, somebody taking a fork and stabbing you in the hand with a fork, and that's pain, but it doesn't have to be suffering. And she's like, I don't know where that came from. It was so funny because as she was saying it, I was here fixing my lunch. And literally when she said somebody picks up a fork, I picked up a fork. I mean, I was doing that as she was talking. I just thought that was a little humorous. Probably didn't mean anything, but it was humorous. But what she was really saying was suffering comes from wishing it was different than it is. Suffering comes from wishing it was different than it is. You know, if you say, and these were Anne's examples, if you say mom shouldn't have died, you're going to suffer. If you can accept that all things that are born pass away, and it was she says the infinite brings you in and the infinite takes you out, right? It was just the time and just be an acceptance of it. Certainly there's still the sadness. Mom's been here all my life. Now mom's gone. This is very fresh. But the wish that it was different is not there. There's acceptance of everything, acceptance of mom's passing, acceptance of my sadness, that I'm not suffering. Suffering from illusion is not natural, and therefore it is not necessary. And I agree with Anne completely. It's just the thought, the wish that it was different that causes suffering. In acceptance, there is no suffering, but there may still be physical pain. There may still be some emotions like mourning the death of a mother, even mourning the death of a pet. Anybody that we're close to. Suffering from illusion is not natural, and therefore it is not necessary. One caught up in a believing illusion may say, but I see as I see, and I cannot get out of seeing this way, right? You know, but dang it, she shouldn't have died, or this shouldn't have happened, right? And that's just where I'm at. Well, one does see as she sees, but one's seeing does not have to be believed. Don't focus on seeing. Don't focus on perception. You can see how this kind of a practice probably in some way leads to what I was describing to you in the last quote, where little burps of anger came up for actually I only remember one little burp of anger for about 60 seconds. A little burp of anger comes up, for about 60 seconds. But because there's been the practice of not focusing on perception, there's no identification with the little burp of anger. If you're always focusing on perception, you're never going to transcend it, because that's where your attention is. You know, I've talked before about how, you know, if Jesus focused on perception and kept looking at perception, he would have been hanging on the cross saying, what did I do wrong? You know, he would have been waiting for perception to be perfect. Perception didn't become perfect. Perception never becomes perfect. What happens is we shift our attention from perception toward truth. And then eventually our identification shifts on its own. You can't make it happen. But identification shifts on its own to truth. And then perception keeps right on going. But you're experiencing everything differently because you aren't identified with the perceptions anymore, not even the perception of the one that they, you know, that you would call me. Right? Suffering from illusion is not natural, and therefore it is not necessary. One caught up in believing illusion may say, but I see as I see, and I cannot get out of seeing this way. One does see as she sees, but one's seeing does not have to be believed. Don't focus on seeing. Or we could say, don't focus on what's seen, or don't focus on what's experienced. That's different than deny it, repress it, right? You allow it to be there, but you don't focus on it. There is a way to be set free from what you see, and the means are reasonable. Contemplate, inquire, reflect on insight. Where is my attention? What am I focusing on? Again, you're not trying to stop anything. You're not trying to be happy instead of sad if sadness is what's here right now. But you're focusing on contemplation, inquiry, and reflecting on insight. So your attention is moving from the experience to truth, even as the experience is continuing on. Let's go to 406. In 7 Steps to Awakening, when the mind abandons the movement of thought, the appearance of the world illusion ceases. Now, mind is another one of those interesting words because it has multiple meanings. One definition of mind is literally attention. So the way this sentence could be read is when the attention abandons the movement of thought, the appearance of the world illusion ceases. Right? So again, we're talking about that shift of attention. When the attention abandons the movement of thought, the appearance of the world illusion ceases. And again, this doesn't mean that you won't still see bodies. It doesn't mean you won't be able to talk to, hey, Shauna, right? Hey, Shauna, blah, 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 right? But it means that what the seeing of essence has moved forward. The seeing of essence is what's real. The seeing of essence is what has meaning. When the mind abandons the movement of thought, the appearance of the world illusion ceases. When attention abandons the movement of thought, when you have shifted your focus, I'm going to say sufficiently, although I don't want you to measure that word sufficiently, but it just means, you know, your heart was in it, right? This was something you were doing as well as possible. Okay? When attention abandons the movement of thought, the appearance of the world illusion ceases. And again, that last part of the sentence, you can't make that happen. That just happens on its own one day by surprise. But you can consciously shift your attention as much as you can consciously shift your attention, right? That can be a purpose that you have. So here's how I contemplated this, number 406, and out of the stillness. The mind is caught in a loop. This loop can be called seeing and believing. The mind sees, which means thinks or perceives, and believes what it sees, which generates more of the same seeing. Thus, the seeing, believing loop continues. And Anne, it seems to me like Anne talked about this morning as well, although I can't remember her specific examples. I don't remember if this was the example of when she talked about it or not, but she was talking about how her mind was saying things like, it's not fair that her mom doesn't get to see April, spring. It's not fair that her mom doesn't get to see April. And this may not have been when she used this example, but I'm going to. So if she continues to believe that thought, that her mom, somehow got ripped off by God because she didn't get to live to see April, then when April comes, Anne is probably going to be really depressed. Probably every April for the rest of her life, right? Or any day that even feels like spring. Because we experience what we believe. And it just continues and continues and continues. So again, where is my attention? It's really important for us to realize that our experience doesn't make it true, but our believing makes it be experienced. That's important, right? Our experience doesn't mean that it's true, but our believing of it makes it be experienced. The mind is caught in a loop. This loop can be called seeing and believing. The mind sees, thinks, perceives, and believes what it sees, which generates more of the same seeing. Thus, the seeing, believing loop continues. The loop, wound up tightly, spins quickly. It does not allow gaps or breaks in the loop. Therefore, seeing and believing continue uninterrupted. This reinforces seeing and believing. And of course, that's for the average person, right? The average person does not question their thoughts or question their perceptions. They are certain that their experience is correct. In fact, we even have the saying, seeing is believing, right? So the loop, wound up tightly, spins quickly. It does not allow gaps or breaks in the loop. Therefore, seeing and believing continue uninterrupted. And this reinforces seeing and believing. Now look at the next paragraph. Contemplation, inquiry, and reflection create gaps in the seeing, believing continuum. There's the way out. And you've all experienced this, right? Like I'm going to say, when you're walking around the daytime, whatever I call it, the problem of the day is, it's like this, it's like this, it's like this. But if in the early morning or whenever, if you sit down and you open up the current book that you are called to, and you contemplate that current book and you're deeply into that contemplation, doesn't the problem of the day disappear for a time? Right? So that's a gap in the seeing, believing continuum. So these gaps happen when we are practicing contemplation, inquiry, or reflecting on insight. Like when I carried the thoughts of awakening around in my pocket and reviewed them multiple times a day. So contemplation, inquiry, and reflection create gaps in the seeing, believing continuum. These gaps create space for light or true wisdom. Hold on, another showing. The first day is always the busiest, So I got to click in and say, okay. So that's good. 2 showings today. That's really good. All right, let me go back. How do I get back? Oh yeah, Kindle. Okay, contemplation, inquiry, and reflection create gaps in the seeing, believing continuum. These gaps create space for light or true wisdom. True wisdom acts like a finger that interrupts the spinning of a pinwheel by poking at it. Eventually, the finger stops the pinwheel completely. When the spinning stops, there is only stillness, light. All right, so you've got this seeing, believing continuum going on. Boom, 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 boom. And like most people, it's just constant, constant, constant. It doesn't take a break. But those of us who are willing to contemplate, inquire, and reflect on truth, we stop it every now and then. Maybe only for a little bit, but we're creating these gaps. And when we create these gaps, this wisdom starts to come in. And if we really reflect on that, contemplate on that, follow that, eventually, I mean, what would happen if you had a pinwheel and you kept sticking your finger in it? Wouldn't eventually it stop? That's what happens to the mind or to the seeing, believing continuum. So you can see how important it is that we take time for contemplation, inquiry, and reflection. Right? If we never take that time, that thing is just, that spin wheel is just spinning, 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 spinning. And I don't have it highlighted to read the next ones, but some sentences are just popping out at me. So I'm just going to read those sentences. 407, there's a sentence that says, the seeing, believing loop is the cause of mistaken self-identification. The seeing, believing loop is the cause of all suffering. The seeing, believing loop is ignorance and hallucination. That's 408. So again, this is really laying out what I consider a pretty simple teaching for what appears to be a very difficult problem. The very difficult problem is the seeing, believing loop that doesn't stop, that the whole world is caught up in. The very simple solution is consciously taking time for contemplation, inquiry, and reflection on insight. And then letting the magic do its thing. Or I guess A Course in Miracles would call it a miracle. It's always felt like magic to me. You know, when a shift occurs, even if you did the practice, somehow you know you didn't make the shift occur, in spite of the fact that you did the practice. Like, you just know that you couldn't have made that shift occur, right? But this light coming in somehow does, and you're allowing the light in. You know, I recently did a Tao Te Ching video on this. It was the part 2 of chapter 10 to the Tao Te Ching. And I talked about how, you know, if you just take this time for stillness, you know, just consciously resting, that light can come in like the master physician and do whatever the heck it needs to do to you. That will then allow you to, maybe you'll start seeing thoughts you weren't even seeing before. Maybe inquiry questions will arise in your mind, a way to look at those thoughts and inquire into those thoughts that never occurred to you before. In fact, and this may be in my next Tao Te Ching video because it kind of fits. It's, you know, I'm always contemplating the next one, right? So in that way I'm one ahead of you. And as I contemplate the next one, that will be done sometime. One thing that keeps coming up in my mind is root cause inquiry. You know, many of you have seen my teaching of root cause inquiry, but do you know I didn't learn that from anybody? Just one day, I was upset at my daughter, really upset. And once I got her off to school and I got in my car before I started driving to work, it just came up, root cause inquiry. I started asking, why am I upset? And it took me all the way down to what I call the I am bad belief. But it just happened. I didn't learn it from anybody. I didn't think it up. Where did it come from? It's the magic. Or it's the power of taking this time in the morning. I didn't even contemplate root cause inquiry in my morning meditation. But the fact that I was taking the time for contemplation and meditation allowed the wisdom to come in and somehow plant that seed, so that when the seed needed to be birthed in my life, it was birthed on its own. I had nothing to do with it. You see, that's how this works. We make ourselves available. And in fact, one of the things I say in the Tao Te Ching video, it's not even any of our business what the master physician is doing to us while we're sitting there in our stillness or in our devotion. You know, you don't want to be looking for what did the master physician do to me today, because you might not notice it. But later, some insight is born. Later, some inquiry question is born. Later, some scene of thoughts that have been there. And you know, sometimes when you see these thoughts, as soon as you see them, you know for a fact they've been there all your life, but you never saw them before. What makes you see something that's been there all your life, but you never saw it before? The magic of God or the miracle, right? And you guys have all experienced this stuff, so you know the master physician is working on you. Did somebody want to say something? Melissa.
Awareness.
Awareness. Yes. Yeah.
It's perfect, right?
Yeah. And you know, and again, if we never take the time for the continuum to stop, we're never giving it the opportunity to come in and do whatever it needs to do. Oh, yay, my oven is done cleaning. That's one of the things I have. You know, I have to be out of here before the first showing, but I had started the oven cleaning before I had showing scheduled. And, you know, you got to let it finish. So it's done, which is good, because I'll be done here in 8 minutes and I can clean it. I'll have to clean the floor once I finish it and then get out of here before the first showing. So that's good. Because if you look right now, you know, right now I'm not ready for the first showing. See, there's the, can you see the oven racks? Am I showing you that, or am I showing you something? I'm showing you my book, I think. There's the oven racks. Maybe now you see them. I don't know what you see, but you know, I have to do I need probably 45 minutes to get out of here, and I got to be out of here by 3. So it's all going to work out just perfect, because it'll be 2 here in about 7 minutes. So I don't have any other highlighted ones for a long time, all the way to 419. 419 is long. Oh my gosh, it's so long. How about if we go ahead and start on it and then see what happens? So, because we have a little bit of time here. So 419 and I keep forgetting the name of the book, The 7 Steps to Awakening. I have to close the cover to look at the book. Isn't that silly? I mean, I know the name of this book. Okay, 419 says, since that omnipresent infinite consciousness alone is present at all times, diversity is absurd and impossible. Again, this is clear non-dual seeing. Since that omnipresent infinite consciousness alone is present at all times, diversity is absurd and impossible. I was talking to a friend the other day who was saying something about individuation of the soul, and you know, asking me question about, you know, the individuation of God. And you know, I mean, once upon a time I might have been able to join in a conversation like that, but I was just like, hey, it's the word absurd really fits. I was trying not to say, what are you talking about? There's no such thing as individuation of God. But, you know, I do kind of understand, because I do kind of remember being in that same point of view. But there's a time when that just disappears, in spite of apparent different people. To believe that there's any such thing as an individual dies. It just dies. And so I can't talk about it. I just, you know, I mean, I think I just sat there very, very quiet. I mean, I didn't even know what to say back. You can't even talk about it. it'd be as if somebody was trying to have a true, honest, philosophical discussion with you about what Santa Claus does right after Christmas. It's just like, I don't really have thoughts about that. I don't have thoughts about that. So I don't have thoughts about individuated souls or even individuated expressions of God, which I know I once would have. Right? So again, since that omnipresent, infinite conscious alone is present at all times, diversity is absurd and impossible. All right, and I got another text. Oh my goodness. Another showing. What the heck? I guess it's just such a nice day. Everybody wants to go look at houses today. Oh, okay, I gotta say, okay. Yep, that's good. Yep, that's good. All right. All right, I gotta get out of here. So we have 4 minutes left. Let me just read through what's in Out of the Stillness, and then we'll start with 419 next time. It is important to separate what is real from what is unreal. Didn't I say that a minute ago, just talking about thoughts? Write down your thoughts and which are really, 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 really true. Everybody would agree with me on this, and which not so much. It is important to separate what is real from what is unreal. It is important not be deluded, not to be, I think. It is important not to be deluded. The deluded suffer. I'm going to start over. It is important to separate what is real from what is unreal. It is important not to be deluded. The deluded suffer. The one that is not deluded is at peace, because truth is unaffected by illusory cause and effect. What is present always, unaffected by anything that can be seen. Is there something constant and changeless here, now? And I answered, yes. What is that? And I said, I cannot separate it from what I am, so I will call it I. Can I be seen? No. I am aware of it, but it cannot be seen. And I'm going to highlight that because I think that's something I really want to look at next week. All right. Does it ever change? No. It remains the same regardless of the changes mind perceives and experiences. Is it a part of mind? No. Mind seems to be within it, but I am before mind. What is it? It is formless self. Does it have a beginning? I don't know. Who doesn't know? Intellectual mind does not know and cannot make that determination. What is obviously unreal because it cannot verify reality? Intellectual mind. Does intellectual mind have a beginning? Yes. What knows this? I don't know. There seems to be an intuitive knowing that knows this. Something knows. This intuitive knowing will be called grandfather because it knows of mind's beginning. Inquiry will attempt to determine what grandfather knowing is by investigating in this direction. And then 420 continues to look at what is the grandfather. Grandfather just being a picked term, but something that's before mind, right? So next week we'll start with 419. We'll look at this, and then we'll move into 420, and we will investigate grandfather. Okay, I got to go get the house clean and get out of here. I'll see y'all. Bye.